Hello, I'm Phil Pryor, and yesterday we were talking about some of the tools, some of the models and processes that we can use in our communications in order to put an effective communications plan together. And yesterday's session was a lot like a lecture, unfortunately. There was a lot of information that I was giving to you, and hopefully you've had the chance to process some of it and you found the additional notes material useful and helpful in your thinking and in your development of ideas. Today, what I'm hoping to do is something that's more interactive, more interesting, change of styles from time to time to keep us engaged and awake. And hopefully where we will be at the end of today is in a place where we can put a communications plan together that will do the job that we want it to do, and will also reflect something of the character and the ideals and the nature of our organisations, something that will stick within our branding and reinforce our brand values and ethos, so that the people we're communicating to have a better understanding of who we are, what we're doing and why we're doing it. That's the plan for this session. There's going to be plenty of opportunity to reflect on some of the things that we looked at yesterday and see how they build up to putting a plan together. And I hope that you'll go away from this session with a much better idea of how you can put your communications to good and effective use. So, where do we start? Well, very often communications are asking us to give one kind of response or another. You could think of it in this way. You may at one point in your life have had somebody from the opposite sex say to you, "Will you go out with me?" And what happens at that point, as that question is asked, is that you build your response on what you know about that person. And you've put together your idea of who that person is, not just by the conversation and the question that you've had at that point, but by all the other influences and actions that you've seen in previous months, and all the kind of the information gets processed in your mind for you to be able to make the decision whether it's good for you to date that individual or not. So you think about what you know about them, you think about the way that they dress, you look at them and you think, do I find this person attractive? Do I find this person interesting? Do we have similar likes and things that we want to spend time together on? Do we think that this person has good values that fit with my values, so that our life together or our time together will be built around common interests and common themes? What about the other inputs as well? You know, do you know their family? Have you met their mother? Do you know what the future's going to be like? Ideas such as that have an influence on how we make that decision, and ultimately the decision on what we think that person is going to be like in the future. How are they going to turn out? And you assess that based on what you've seen in the past and all this information that comes together, and you make a judgment and think, yes, I would like to go out with you, or possibly if they're proposing marriage, yes, I would like to marry you because of what I've seen in the past, because of who I know you to be. I have an idea of where you're going to be and who you're going to be in the future. In humans, we call it character or personality. In companies and organisations, we call it branding. We look at the values of a company and of an organisation, and we think about how they look and how they sound, and we decide whether we want to do business with them, whether we want to trade with them, whether we want to be in a relationship with them, and whether that relationship is going to be a one-off, one-hit transaction, or whether actually there is value in what's going to happen and what's going to take place in the future. Can we see a long-term thing coming out of this? Because ultimately, when you trade, when you have a relationship with a company, you're actually saying something about yourself. When you walk down the aisle of a supermarket and you go in to buy a shampoo product, you make some value decisions based on the information that you're given, and on the information that you know in the past. So presented with a shelf of options, you look and say, well, what can I afford? What do I know works with my style of hair? What will give my hair the volume and body and bounce and stuff that I want it to have after I've washed it in this product? Do I have greasy or normal or flaky or dry, or what kind of hair do I have? Is it in the right size bottle to be able to pack in my airline luggage? And on those bases, you make a purchase of that product, possibly also with a thought in your mind about what does it say about me. So if you come and if you visit someone and you go into their bathroom and you're visiting a bachelor pad, but you see a lot of feminine hair care products on the shelf, what kind of value judgments do you make about the person that is living in that place? What do they think about their appearance? Who are they trying to be? There's all this information tied up within the package and within the brand. And that's what we're talking about today. Branding has been described by Picton and Broderick, who we were talking about yesterday, and they describe branding as, or they say about branding, branding and brands are identified in the integrated marketing communications process model as an output of the marketing communications process. So you remember yesterday when we were talking about the communications loop, when you get to the end of it, the bit over on the right hand side when word of mouth is taking place, that is where your brand is developing. As an output of the marketing communications process and as the broad overarching task of image and brand management. Branding describes the values generated in the minds of people as a consequence of the sum total of the marketing communications effort. So everything that you put into your communications, whether you're asking people to pray, give, go or tell, what you're actually doing is you are creating a brand image. So as a result of all our communication, all those P's that we talked about yesterday, those 7 P's, each of our activities under those headings are creating our brand image. And if you don't believe me, let's try this. We're going to look at a few advertisements now, a couple of TV advertisements and a couple of print advertisements from back in the day. And I'd like you to have a look and tell me who you think those adverts are targeted at, what kind of values you think that they are trying to convey, what kind of age of audience they're looking at, what kind of wealth, their interests, and what these adverts are saying about the product that they're promoting. So have a look at these videos, have a look at the advertisements, and just come back and say, have a think about the kind of values, the kind of message that they're conveying, and specifically who they're targeting in the audience. So what did you make of those advertisements? What did you get out of them? Who were they targeted at, and what did they say about the people that they were being sold to? Another interesting one to look at is this advertisement that Jeep Jeep Wrangler posted on their Facebook page. And they asked their Facebook fans, their followers, what this shape means to them, what it says. What do you feel when you look at this shape? And all it is the silhouette of a Jeep Wrangler. And it was amazing. There were 160 responses to this, and some said strength, others said power, and most said freedom. Freedom. How do you get to freedom just from the silhouette of a vehicle? It's a four-wheel drive off-road vehicle. What does that have anything to do with this concept of freedom? Well, actually, it's an idea and a theme that has been packaged into Jeep adverts right back from the beginning, right from when they first released the Jeep. And if you look through these next few images, you'll get a sense of what I mean. We see the Jeep in off-road situations. They're outside. The very early adverts, while picturing the vehicle doing some amazing stuff, they also show the features and the benefits of the vehicle. So they're showing the different types of suspension that it uses, the different way the frame is built to give security that you are going to be able to go out and visit wherever you want to visit in the future. Even when they try and package the Jeep as an urban car, something that you can use every day on your commute to work, they still bill it as being an external, an out in the country type of vehicle. In this advert they say the new Jeep Wrangler is ready for everything, or ready for anything, even the environment Jeep drivers dread the most, civilization. So this car, this vehicle, can deal with the everyday commute and being stuck in traffic, but actually where it desires to be most is out in the country. And as they develop the product, and they add more doors to it, and they try and bill it more as a family car, maybe taking into consideration the fact that their original target audience has now grown up and has children of their own, and they need to reach out and make their way in that market as well. What actually happens within the advertising is that the product itself, the Jeep, that by now everybody is very familiar with, becomes a really, really small part of the advertisement. And actually it's the idea of what that Jeep brings, the idea that you can escape into the countryside where you can have picnics and be eaten by lions and bears. It's accessible because you can take the Jeep there, and you don't even have to show the product anymore. That no longer matters. And that's achieved by keeping the core of your communications the same all the way through the process. So Jeep has always been associated with off-road, adventurous, out in the countryside kind of activities. And it's obviously worked on the customers because they identify the Jeep as something that brings freedom, something that's strong and powerful and that can take you where no other vehicle can take you to. And as you see the fact that the product comes out of the advertising, it gives you an idea of how powerful this consistency in advertising can be. How powerful it can be when you picture something in the same kind of setting, the same kind of environment, time after time after time, when the same styling cues are in there, where the same kind of package is put together each time. You can start to drop things, like the product, and still convey a message. Now that's interesting and useful if it's just for one particular company, but it also enables others to make, I guess, a play-on kind of thing if they need to. And we looked in your packs, and back a few minutes ago, we looked at the Marlboro Man, which was back in the days of cigarette advertising and when these cigarette brands were very, very strong and where their advertising was very, very strong. There was the idea of the Marlboro Man, the cowboy, the original cowboy who would be out there in the fields fixing fences and looking after the animals and that kind of thing. And that played right into the hands of the anti-smoking lobby and the anti-smoking campaigners because they could put adverts together without mentioning the product that they were targeting and say something about it. So here we have this image, second-hand smoke kills. and an image of a dead horse next to the Marlboro Man, next to this guy who's standing over his horse looking and saying, "Second-hand smoke kills." And we know, without Marlboro cigarettes being in that image, we know what it's about. And we know that it's not talking about car fumes or smoke coming from factories. We know specifically that there is a link to cigarette smoke without it even being stated in the advertisement. They've even gone so far as to make sure that the text, that the font that they use matches up with the Marlboro logo. There aren't so many exactly the same letters in each of the sentences, but this "second-hand smoke kills" and the Marlboro typeface are pretty much exactly the same. You've got that tie up together. And it's almost as though you could take one image out of one advertisement and just cut it across into the other advertisement. You can take the guy, the Marlboro Man fixing the fence, and drop him into standing over this horse, and you won't miss a beat. It will be exactly the same. And this is generated by two key fundamental parts. One, Marlboro and these other companies knew what their core was. They knew what the central aspect of what they were about, and that made its way into every single part of their communications. They were consistent across the board with what they were saying. And those are the important things that when you are communicating, and it gets boring and repetitive to us because we see the same kind of stuff every day, but that all of your communications are centred around what the core idea, what your central part of your organisation is all about, and that they are consistent in their message, in their style, in their tone of voice, so that everything that's produced sounds like and looks like it has come from the same place. It requires a great deal of accuracy, and you have to be careful that you don't paint yourself to be something you're not. So it would be great to make great claims, but if they're not true and they can't be backed up, then actually what you do is you damage your brand, because eventually it breaks and the whole thing falls apart. Instead, what you need to make sure is you're consistent, you're accurate, and you're getting that core communicated. And we've already talked about the 7 Ps of services marketing. And these are the elements that you would put together to make up the idea of your brand. These are the kind of the different areas that you would look at, the different areas where you would put things in place, and they would make up the final idea. The output of these things would make up the final idea of your brand. So your product, your price, your place, your promotion, your people, your physical evidence, and your processes are all things that tie together, and what you do under those communicates who you are, what your brand is. If you want to have a look with me at John Lewis. John Lewis is a department store in the UK. They have a great long history. Up until probably about 10 or 15 years ago, each of their stores had different names, and over a period of time they brought themselves together under the name John Lewis. So almost in every major city in the UK you can find a John Lewis department store. And inside those stores everything is similar. You can tell what a John Lewis product is. You can tell the people that have gone shopping at John Lewis. And department stores are a service industry. You can go shopping in lots of different places. You can go shopping on Amazon, you can go shopping in the local supermarket and find lots of things. But it's the evidence that are provided by department stores that show the strength of their brand and is communicated through that. So, for example, John Lewis, your evidence that you have engaged and taken a service from them is the shopping bag that you walk away with. Every store you leave, you have a John Lewis bag with your product inside, and it's consistent wherever you go. If you buy a John Lewis own brand product, the product itself may be different from box to box, but the boxes will look similar in style and feel. And if you picked one up, probably without even looking too much at the name or the detail on there, you will be able to tell that it came from John Lewis. If you see their stores on the street, their name appears in the same place, above the door, in the same type font. It's consistent wherever it happens to be. They use the same colour palette between each of the stores, these kind of greens and browns. that you can pick up. When you buy a product and the product is delivered to you, it comes in a John Lewis van. It's not actually John Lewis that you're buying, but it comes in a John Lewis van. There is evidence of you buying that product, that service from that place. And their staff as well. Their staff, the people that you engage with, are dressed in the same way, treat each of the customers in the same way, give a similar kind of service to each of the customers. So you build up through this kind of evidence, through the physical evidence and through the process that you go through when purchasing something from John Lewis, you build up an idea of the company and who it is. And that idea of process, the fact that this is a historic company, the fact that they pride themselves in giving good service to generations within families, is something that they push particularly through their advertisements. And we're now going to look at a couple of the television adverts that they've produced, and you'll see similar themes that come out through those, looking at the history of the company, looking at the values, the fact that they provide services for the whole family, that they've taken care of families over generations, and it's something that they're proud of as a business. And you'll see this in these couple of commercials coming up now. They're great commercials. In the UK, John Lewis is becoming a bit like Coca-Cola. They only release 1 or 2 adverts per year, but everybody waits for it because there's something special about a John Lewis commercial. And their brand has become really recognised. So let's think some more about branding. And the choice really is, why bother with it? Why do we bother with branding? Well, part of it is a recognition that everything we do communicates. The conversations that we have about our work, the pieces of information that we hand out, the literature that we have, what we put on our website, the letters that we send, the appeals that we send. Every time we put on a Wycliffe t-shirt or an organisational t-shirt, everything we do in some way or another communicates. And when you have all your communications coming together under the same brand, when everything is giving the same kind of message, what you actually do is you strengthen yourself. You become a stronger identity if everything you do is the same. We were talking earlier about that question about, will you go out with me? If that person that asked that question seems to have very different kind of lifestyles, very different kinds of values, just seemingly depending on whatever the day is. So on Sunday they're there in church with their Bible sat on the front row listening intently to the preacher or singing in the choir. But on Friday night and Saturday night they're out in the pub, they're drinking heavily, they're smoking, they seem to go home with a different guy or a different girl every night. You start to wonder which is the true picture of that person. You question who they are really. And it's very difficult to make a decision on will you go out with me, because you don't know whether you're answering to the person that's out in the pubs on a Friday or a Saturday night, or whether you're answering to the person that's in church on a Sunday morning. When your brand is consistent, people get an idea of what your organisation is all about, and your communications become clearer. And they have a sense of whether they want to do business with you, whether they want to enter into a relationship with you. So it strengthens your position and it builds your relationships as well, because people start in that relationship with you and they have an idea of where they're going. There's this idea of a customer relationship ladder, that when people first start, when they've not purchased anything from you before, when they're just somebody who's maybe circling around the outside of your organisation, just listening in a little bit to try and find out about who you are, they're a prospect. There's no business taking place there. And then as they start to engage, as they start to do more and become more involved with you, they become a trialist and they become a customer, and they get into repeat purchasing patterns, so they keep coming back. They give once to support a project one Christmas, and they like what happens. They like the news that they get back about that project. So not only do they give next Christmas, but they give kind of in between as well, because they want to see more taking place, until they get to the point of thinking, actually, I'm really bought into this organisation. I love their values, I love what they're doing seems to be really important. I want my friends, I want my neighbours, I want my family to know about this, and I want them to come into a relationship with this organisation as well. And they become a brand evangelist. And they can do that because all of your communications has been consistent, and they know then what they're talking about. They have a level of expertise that they can share to other people. So this is why we do branding. This is why we put all this effort into making sure that our identity and our communications are consistent, because we want our supporters, want those people that we work with, to be able to become evangelists on our part, to be able to spread the news of the need for Bible translation around the world, and to be able to talk to other people about it, so that the 2 or 3 of us that are stuck in an office don't have to do all that work ourselves. And a consistent brand enables others to be able to do that. Yesterday we spent a huge amount of time thinking through some of these strategies, and I just want to talk through now how we might pull those together to make some kind of communications plan. And one of the key things that we hung our processes on was the 5-step model. And we started at the beginning asking, where are we now? And just gave a few ideas of how we might put this together. So I suggested a SWOT rather than a SWAT analysis, a SWOT analysis where we think of the strengths, weaknesses, opportunities and threats. So what are our strengths? Well, maybe we are strong in the kind of quality of work that we are doing. We do things well, especially in training and supporting our members. That kind of area of our work is really strong. We're academically rigorous in what we do. And the majority of Christians actually believe fundamentally that what we do is important. And further than that, if you include all the other Wycliffe organisations around the world, we are a world leader in Bible translation. We are working in over 1,400 projects worldwide. Nobody has a network as big as what we do, or probably a staff or a membership team as we have. So that's a real strength. But there may be some weaknesses on that as well. In our country, we may be small in number. Yes, as a worldwide organisation we may be big, but actually if you look at other mission organisations and then look at us, in the country that we're working in, we may appear to be quite small. And our team, the team of people that we have available to work, may have a great deal of expertise in the practices of Bible translation, but when it comes to leading an organisation, and managing people, and managing resources, and fixing IT, then there may be some weaknesses there. There may be some weaknesses in our staff team. And maybe those who are our financial supporters, they're older. What does that mean for us in the future? And then there could be some opportunities as well. We have possibly a very visible public champion, or one of our members is about to finish a translation project and there's going to be a big celebration, something that we can publicise well. Or that there is a prospective new member who maybe comes from a very influential church. If they're on board, then it opens up a whole other world of opportunities. But then there's some threats as well, things that we need to consider that are happening outside of our organisation but may have an impact on us directly. So there may be some international issues that could well divide our supporter base, or possibly the church in the country that we're working in is actually shrinking. There's less Christians. There's a smaller pool to fish in. And then as well, we wanted to consider competitor analysis. Are we the only Bible translation organisation in our country, or are there others as well? Are there direct competitors in that sense? Are there other mission organisations? You know, are we one of 5 Christian mission organisations vying for attention in the church? Or are we one of 50 mission organisations vying for attention in the church? Or are there other distractions that take people's time away from us? Is the church very strong on mission and less interested in getting involved with mission agencies? So what's going on? What's happening in relation to competition? And customer relationship management analysis. So are we in good relationships with our current supporters? Or have there maybe been a couple of systems failures in the last year, or a couple of relationships that have gone off track that actually have hurt us, maybe in a small way, but potentially could have an impact if the story leaks out, could impact us in a big way? What's our relationship like? And as an organisation, what kind of situation are we in? Do we only have one person that's trying to do all the work of this organisation? Finance is hard to come by. Or actually, are we very, very blessed and very, very well off in a number of areas, in the place where we work, in the relationships that we have, in the financial situation or in the staffing sense? What is our organisational situation? And then we think about where we want to be. And chances are you have a mission or an objective. Not necessarily the Vision 2025 statement, as good as that is, but for you, your specific organisation in your country, where are you going? What is your aim? What is your ambition? It might be something like, we want all people to engage with the Bible in a language which speaks to their heart, and to achieve this we want to engage churches, agencies or individuals to work with us. Now that's a very big and broad top-level statement. So do we have some kind of interim targets that we need to hit, maybe a 5-year plan, that we know if we are going to achieve this big objective, the part that we need to play is this? And it's going to be different for different organisations, but you may also want to think about the different segments of people that you're trying to attract and trying to work with, and think about whether there is the same thing that applies across the board, or whether it's different for different segments. So, is there a particular supporter group that to achieve our targets we need to work with? And what's the situation with them? Do we need to consciously encourage younger people to get involved with us? And do we need to be showing Bible translation to be exciting and interesting, or is our image something that's more historic and more old-fashioned? How are we going to segment the message for the different groups that we might need to attract and work with? And how are we going to position ourselves within each of those groups? Do we give the same message to the 75-year-old loyal supporter that we give to the 18-year-old languages graduate? What's the different positions there? Where do we want to be with each of those groups within the market? And how are we going to target them? How are we going to reach them? And do we have a good understanding of the environment that we work within? We mentioned in the SWOT analysis about the strength of the church within our areas. But what about the situation within the church? Do they have a strong, firm faith in the Bible and its place within society, or is that starting to weaken? Are people wealthy, or is the current credit crunch really making things tough for folk? And then we need to think as well about our current situation and the current portfolio of products and things that we have to share with people. So, are all our communications in print? Or do we do some things online and on Facebook? Why? Do they all look the same, or do they have a different message in each of them? Could they be attributed to the same company, to the same organisation? Do we have different groups engaging with different publications in different ways. You may have a small Facebook group which is really popular with the 30-somethings, but actually when you look at it, they're all current members of your organisation, or maybe they're all related to members. So actually, how wide a message is Facebook giving you? It's things like that that we might need to think about. And then the question about how we might get to the destination that we have in mind. And this is where I go back to that 7 Ps model, which I will work through in slightly slower and in slightly more detail here. But thinking about this, do we have the right products in place for the audience that we are trying to attract? And are the products we're producing consistent with the kind of image that we want to convey? So are we producing magazines, and do they look like they come from the same organisation that has that particular website? If somebody saw your web address on the magazine and then typed in the address into their web browser, would it bring up something that looked like it was relating to that print product? Are we asking too much or too little? Sorry, I'm thinking of price here. Are we asking for too much or too little from people? If we do an appeal that asks everybody to reply and give €1, are we saying that Bible translation is achievable by lots of people giving €1 once a year? Or actually, should we be setting the bar a little higher? Should we be asking people to give €100 or 1,000? If you're relating to somebody of great wealth, would you ask them for €5? Or maybe you would ask them for 10,000 and say to them, we know you have means, you could actually sponsor an entire project by doing this. Think about these kind of things, but also don't just think about them in terms of appeals, but also think in terms of recruitment. Are we asking for the right level of commitment from people? Apparently, back in the day, people used to join Wycliffe for life. And the story now is more people are joining up to give 1 or 2 years. Are we setting the bar high enough? Do our recruitment materials ask for the right quality of people? If we start taking anyone, regardless of their training or background, what's it going to say about the quality of the work that we're doing? Questions about that. The place. Where are the people that we need to connect with to achieve our aim? And where do we need to be to reach them? Can we reach everyone just through our mailing list and by sending out print products? Or do we need to have something online? Or do we need to target a particular region where maybe a group is particularly strong, or where lots of people have been recruited to serve with us previously? You can think about these kind of things, where we need to appear and how we're going to get into those particular areas. And then promotion. What's the best way to promote what we're doing? Do we use advertising, direct mail, email, social media? Do we run events or make phone calls? And are we using the right media for the audience? Is this the right kind of method for attracting people? For those 70 plus, for those supporters over 75 years of age, trying to send them Facebook messages once a week, is that the right medium for connecting with them? Possibly it is. Do you know? These are other questions that we might need to ask, thinking about how we might get to the destination that we want to be in. Then thinking about people. Do we have the right people on board to achieve the aim that we're going for? We may have decided that we want to run a big event next year that's going to attract thousands and thousands of people, and we know that we can get thousands and thousands of people to come along to this. We know that if we use the right advertising and the right communications people, they're all going to descend on this one location for the day, and here we are, we're going to have a big crowd of 5,000 people that we're going to be able to talk to about Bible translation. The only problem is that the only speaker available for that day is slightly depressed, slightly unenthusiastic, has a kind of 18th century idea of mission, is not really a great communicator, do you still go ahead with the event? Do you have the right people on board? It may be as simple as going to a show, and I remember going to a thing in the UK called the Christian Resources Exhibition, where lots of different charities and churches and Christian businesses all turn up and display their wares. And some of it's quite interesting, some of it's quite useful, and some of it is quite soul-destroying. But I remember a theatre company that were there, and they were trying to convey their message and infuse people about this young and dynamic and interesting theatre company. And they had 2 retired volunteers who spent the entire event sat down, drinking tea, and looking like they wanted to be somewhere else. Do we have the right people in place to be able to achieve the aim? If we don't have the right people in place, is it the right thing to be progressing with, or do we actually need to take another look at our recruitment and the kind of staff availability that we have? How might we get there? Well, we also think about physical evidence. We've talked about being a service industry more than a product-led industry. So we're not so much about packaging up Bibles and selling them to people in our country. We're more about the evidence of the connection that people have with us. So when we run our great event, do people have something to go away with when they're enthusiastic about what we're up to that shows that they've been connected with us? When we send a letter to people, does it always go on headed paper with our logo, using the same typeface and signed, or is it just any old scrap of plain paper that's around the office? What evidence will they have for their show of connection with us? And ultimately, it's this connection and it's this evidence that enables them to carry out that part, that word of mouth, on the end of our communications plan. So you remember the communications loop with the sender, the message, the media, and the receiver going across the screen. And underneath there's this loop. And off on one side with the receiver there's this box that says word of mouth. And that's where people start talking about you. And it's a bit uncomfortable because you've got no control over that word of mouth and what they say. But as they talk about you and as they talk enthusiastically about you, they're encouraging others to engage in a conversation with you and come into that loop so that you can have more control over the message. And if we provide them with the right physical evidence to do this, if we provide them with the right cards, with the right material, then it's much easier for them to carry on and to have that conversation and to spread the word about what we're doing. But also, are the processes in place to support our activity? Do we have all the things that we need in order to achieve our aim? If we go and run this event and we come back with 1,000 new people signed up to want to get engaged with what we're doing, do we know what's going to happen next for them? Do we know if we have the right permission? Do we know if we have the right contact details in order to carry on and to build that relationship? What's our process for enabling that to happen? And when people do connect with us, maybe they phone up and they speak to us, and maybe it's a question, why do we need to carry on translating the Bible? Surely everybody's got the Bible now. Or the popular one, why don't we teach everybody English or Spanish or French or German or Dutch or whatever? If people phone up and ask that, what kind of response do they get on the other end of the phone? Do they get a cheery, hello, you're through to Wycliffe Bible Translators, this is Phil speaking, how can I help you? Or do they get a, hello, what do you want? Or hello, it's good to have your call. You can say the right words, but if you don't say them with the right attitude, then they don't sound as though they mean anything. So it's not just the content of how we respond, but it's also the way and the emotion that's conveyed too. And then, when we've got all these kind of rough ideas of plans in place, we have an idea of what kind of people we need to run the event, and we think that we can get them, and we have an idea of where the event's going to take place and how we're going to promote it, and we've put all that package together, we need to make some decisions about which of the choices is the best way to do it. And maybe the first choice is actually to say, well, a big event is a huge commitment. Actually, it's going to take 50% of our turnover in order to make that event take place, and I'm not prepared to risk that. So what if we do an event that's only 10% of the size of that? It's only going to cost us 5% of our turnover for this year. It's something that we can afford to risk, and if it's really successful, we know that we can build on it for next year. So test things. Or in this process, you may already have hit some issues. Maybe it is the fact that you don't have the right people in order to do what you want to do. Or maybe you don't have the right process in place to make sure that when you get all these willing volunteers and these good contact details, you know that you haven't got the process to make sure that you stay in contact with them already laid out. Maybe you need to go and fix those things before you carry on with the rest of your plan. Or maybe you delay this plan for another 12 months and acknowledge that the first stage actually has got to be fixing that problem. And then when things are underway, and we did talk a bit about this, how can we ensure safe arrival? How can we make sure that we get to the end of this in the best possible situation? And when that event is taking place, what kind of risks do we need to acknowledge before we let the event go on? Or what kind of things might interfere? You know, are there elections around that time that are going to cause us problems? Maybe we're better off picking a different month. Or maybe not using that building because of what goes on next door, so maybe we need to move it to another location. Or how are we going to cope with people and transport, or all these different questions. What kind of risks do we need to acknowledge? And then as the process is unfurling, are we hitting markers at each stage? Do we know what's taking place? Has something slipped? Maybe a leaflet hasn't come back from the printers on time. Does that push the date back a bit? How do we manage with those different things? So is everything occurring on schedule to make it take place and take place well? And as we said at the end, you have to review this process. You get to the end of whatever you've set out to achieve and you say, yes, that was a great success, or actually no, we need to make some changes if we're going to do it again next year, or maybe this isn't the right thing to be doing anymore. And it happens in different ways, and I think probably the best way to finish off is to talk a little bit about what we have done with Wycliffe in the UK over the last 3 years while I've been around. When I first arrived, I actually had some research that was presented to me. It had already been done, and some of the research kind of jumped out and struck me as being important. Like one bit of feedback that says, I have no idea what it's selling or what the charity is. No clue. And back then, we looked very different to the way that we look today. Our materials had developed over time. Our logo had kind of come in, and there had been various tweaks over the years and a few changes. We'd had this idea about dropping Bible translators from the Wycliffe name because we felt that it was tying us too much to recruiting people who were linguists and not enough in recruiting people who were interested in IT or in other areas. So we had become Wycliffe, or Wycliffe UK, and we had a logo that had just been developed and redeveloped over time and wasn't fitting the bill. We also had a number of, I guess, what you would call sub-brands. The Vision 2025 brand had appeared, and we tried to launch this as more of a para-organisation thing that more people could buy into. But each brand requires its own investment, its own communication, its own build-up over time, and there is a physical cost, both in people and in price, in enabling you to run more than one brand. It's worth thinking actually within your own organisation, how many brands and how many sub-brands are we actually trying to run? Maybe you should just be trying to organise for one to come out. And we had some feedback through this research that said, well, our logo looks like a W with 2 dots. It's bland, it's dated, and it's old-fashioned. And our communications hadn't been particularly strong either. We'd said lots of things, but it was striking the number of people that came back through this research that said, I'd worked on the naive assumption that the Bible was already available in every language. So there wasn't a strong idea of the need for Bible translation. There wasn't really a strong idea of who Wycliffe Bible translators were. So, over a period of time, we made some changes. We developed a new logo, which looked slightly different, slightly livelier, but also brought in the Bible translator's name. So we are back to being called, within the UK, Wycliffe Bible Translators. It's worth saying, we're trying to take care on any publication or anything that may appear outside of the UK to tag the words on the end, in the UK, or to say in whatever statement, in the UK, Wycliffe Bible Translators are. Because it's important that while we're part of a global organisation, there are some things that we shouldn't be speaking for everybody on. So we are Wycliffe Bible Translators in the UK, and when we're in the UK, we just use the name Wycliffe Bible Translators. And again, we had some research done on this, and the feedback was good. It was positive. They said the logo looks joyous, it's spreading the word, it looks like leaping in the air or happy, it's easily recognisable. It looks like a children's charity or an exercise class. Now, those last two, they're not necessarily completely positive. I would love everybody to look at our logo, our image, and say, oh look, Wycliffe Bible Translators, they're all about such and such. But actually, it's a recognition that people still struggle sometimes with who we are. But the message that they were taking out of that and our other material is the fact that we are involved in Bible translation. In fact, one statement said, they translate the Bible, we all get it, so they understand what we're about. And one other piece of feedback says that everyone has the right to know about Jesus around the world. This company is obviously seeing to that right. So, there you go. And as you can see, we've put our materials together so they look similar. Our ideal will be that if in 5 years' time a piece of material is available in the church and the Wycliffe logo is covered up, they will still be able to identify it as coming from Wycliffe. So all of our magazines, all of our flyers, all of our posters, all of our advertisements, they all have the same style. And actually we've taken the decision that we're going to work with a proper design agency to get this done, that we get one other company, this company called Yeomans that we work with, we get them to do the design and the print to make sure that every piece of material that we produce publicly is of high quality, is well designed, and it clearly sticks to our brand image. So that whatever piece of paper people pick up, it should look like it comes from Wycliffe. And that extends to our displays as well. You know, what we take out when we go to churches and when we go to events and exhibitions to show that we come from Wycliffe, there is consistency across the piece. Everywhere. You cannot escape the fact that we're Wycliffe. Now, in-house, we might get quite bored with this and quite tired with saying the same thing over and over again. But that's fine. The thing that we need to bear in mind and need to remember is that people in churches, the people that we're communicating with, may only hear directly from us once a quarter, once every 6 months. Maybe only once a year does Wycliffe get mentioned publicly within the church, and it may be once every 2 or 3 years that we come round as their chosen, supported charity. We need to make sure that however infrequently people are connecting with us, that we look consistent enough that they build up an image and a picture in their mind of who we are. That's what branding is about. That's what good communication is about staying consistent with your message, with the language that you're using, with the kinds of words and illustrations that you use, with the similar kind of photographs, so that people get an idea of who you are, who your organisation is, so they build up recognition of it. And they start on that journey, that ladder, that they start investigating who you are, who we are, what we're all about, to move on that journey of becoming a repeat customer and ultimately an evangelist for us as organisations. And we do this well, not to benefit us. This isn't about doing the best job so that we can pat ourselves on the back and say we look like a great organisation compared with all these other mission organisations. This isn't. This is so that we can do the most effective job possible in supporting Bible translation. It's not for our benefit that we're doing this, it's for others. And that's why I would encourage all of you to think properly and plan properly your communications. Not for our benefit, but for the benefit of others as well. That's all I have to say. I know it's been a lot. I hope we've had the chance to meet in person, but if not, feel free to get in contact with me via email or on Skype or however. I'd be happy to talk some more to you about this, or you can use these videos and re-watch them as many times as you need to. There are other ideas out there. This isn't the only way, but it's the way that I work and it's the way that I find useful. I hope it's useful for you as well, and that you enjoy the rest of this event. And I hope I'm with you in person. All right, thanks very much.